Well, sticking with housing, a new poll finds a third of Canadians are exploring alternative ways of buying a first home, including co ownership, rent to own scenarios, or perhaps looking for a suite that they can rent out as a mortgage helper. Almost half in the poll said they would consider those things in the future. Now, this is a poll conducted by Leger on behalf of Remax Canada. It was an online survey done in January among 1,522 Canadian residents. They polled in 22 cities, including Vancouver, Victoria, and Kelowna. And in particular, they found that more people in Kelowna said they had entered a non traditional form of home ownership in the past year. Well, we want to hear from you. Would you consider alternative ways to buy a home? Would you split the purchase of a property to bring down your cost? Would you rent out part of your home to help with the mortgage costs? Or would you look for a scenario that's rent to own? You can call us 1 800 825 5950 604 669 3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Again, by email, bctoday@cbc.ca, or you can text us to 236 330 2623. Joining me now is Tim Hill. He's a real estate advisor with Remax Points Realty. He's based in Vancouver and he contributed to the poll. Hi there, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Michelle, thank you for having me.
Tell us, were you surprised by these findings, to hear that people were looking for these alternative ways of just getting into the market?
I wasn't personally surprised. With affordability being at it's such a tough market in Vancouver that you need to get creative on how do you enter homeownership if that's a goal, because it's not a goal for everybody, and I realize
Right.
that as well. But when you look at costs and rising interest rates, as we've seen over the last few years, getting creative to get into homeownership model is something that we're seeing more of today.
Well, tell me more about, what you hear from your clients. You're based in Vancouver, and I know that the poll did not find a significant increase in this trend in Vancouver over the past year. Things like looking for a home with a suite to rent out. But, anecdotally, I wonder, have you seen that become more common over recent years?
I would say the last 3 to 4 years is when we've really seen suites become really almost a mandatory part of home buyers' purchase for a detached home. In order to qualify at even the previous interest rates that we were at and to be able to afford that home's mortgage payment, having the suite income was a huge factor for a lot of clients, and homes with suites tended to sell a lot quicker because of that as well.
Hmm. What are some, I guess, some stories or sentiments that you hear from your clients or even just people making inquiries?
I think a lot of it is monetary threshold. So what price points can our average buyer acquire a home with or without a suite? And based on incomes as well, what are our thresholds where those values of the home that they can or can't afford? And so we find that. These days it's tough to throw around the $1 million mark, but there's not a lot that's under that anymore, especially on a non-existent really, right? But you get these thresholds, 1.250, which is quite a common number that buyers are after. Then you get the 1.5, and they sort of shift in about $250,000 increments.
And what was the impetus for this poll? Why did Remax want to, seek more information about the kinds of housing arrangements or ownership arrangements people were seeking?
In my opinion, it was to find out if what we were seeing in the trenches was a reality out there. So actually hearing from the public on, is this something that you're interested in? Is this something that you're considering?
Hmm.
And I also, a lot of people don't, they're not aware of these different ways of home ownership as well, or, what are their paths to get them into that?
Okay, let's take a call here. We are talking about alternative ways of purchasing a home. So a new poll conducted by Leger on behalf of Remax Canada found that a third of Canadians are exploring these alternative ways of purchasing a home. They include rent-to-own scenarios, looking for a home with a suite to rent out, or co-ownership, purchasing a home together. So you can let us know, would you consider splitting the purchase of a home in order to help bring down your cost? Would you rent out a part of your home? Is that part of what you're looking for to be able to afford one? Would you want to rent to own? I'd love to hear for your thoughts on these. Are these good options? 1 800 825 5950 604 669 3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. We're going to hear from someone who specializes in collaborative home ownership in a few minutes from now as well. Dan is calling us from Kelowna, where they did find in this poll that there was a significant increase in people looking for alternative ways of purchasing a home. Hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, thanks. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I was calling in. So I'm a renovator. We do quite a few legal suites, and they cost about $120,000 to put into a home,
Wow.
just as a sort of a ballpark number. And I have worked now twice with the city, at least attempted to work with them, in order to get them to adopt tiny homes in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, a laneway house is, you're looking at somewhere between $350 to $400 a square foot. So you're, $350 to $500,000 to put a laneway house in. And they passed zoning changes several years ago that made every property downtown laneway housing acceptable.
Okay.
And I've worked with several homeowners who are looking for alternatives for how to pay for their mortgage, make the most of their house. And we've looked at it, and you could put in a properly serviced, connected RV pad in the back of a property to $35,000.
Okay.
That would allow somebody to bring their own tiny home and live in Kelowna and add density to the downtown core, which is needed.
Okay.
And as we see young people being more transient, again, tiny homes are an awesome option. My brother, in fact, lives in one up by Prince
So
George.
what's
You
getting
guys
in the
were talking
way?
about.
What's getting in the way, Dan?
They won't accept it. Just straight up, it's a no. We're not interested. We're not willing to do it. I think it's ridiculous because, all these homes downtown are getting bought up, torn down. They're putting in fourplexes. People would be able to very easily uninstall an RV pad versus a foundationed carriage house. And
Okay.
the city's just not interested. And a lot of these tiny homes are beautiful. There's a company out of Vernon called Summit Tiny Homes, and they make absolutely gorgeous tiny homes that look like a home, a very modern, beautiful home that could just sit in the back alley, take up very little space, even a smaller footprint than a carriage house. And the homeowners could rent that pad out from anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month.
Really interesting, Dan. Thank you so much. So allowing for laneway homes that are, foundationed, but the tiny home is what he's saying that Kelowna should allow through zoning. I'd love to ask Tim Hill a question about that because, people, as you said, people are being creative. And so what happens when they are, they're bound by the zoning that doesn't allow for those kind of creative measures. You mentioned the poll mentions rent to own, for example. Have you seen actual examples of this if people want them? So what about when the creative measures they would like to seek are not currently allowed?
I think Dan's idea is really neat personally. I thought that was a really cool option. It sounds like it'd be a much more cost-effective way to get an additional income to the homeowner and to also create more housing. So I love it personally. What happens with the zoning, to your question, is that zonings don't think outside the box, and they haven't for a long time. Now we've got a provincial mandate that's coming down. It's it still needs to be officially passed coming in the next few months, but that will allow a lot more options on single-family lots, and
Right.
that will be a zoning, right? So that's another step in the right direction. The unfortunate reality is that dealing with municipality zonings right now, they are what they are. They're black and white. There is no thinking outside the box. And it's unfortunate that that idea, which seems great, is just something that won't work in today's market.
Okay, let's take another call here. Megan is in Vancouver. Would you consider alternative ways of purchasing a home, Megan?
Yeah, we actually did. We do own a house with another couple.
Hmm.
It's my brother and his wife, and we are upstairs and they're downstairs.
Wow. Okay. So how did you come to that decision?
It took us a couple years of talking through it to decide if financially it made sense for both of us, if we could find a house that would suit kind of all four people's needs, and yeah, we've been we've been living in the same house for about 2 years, and it's been going really well.
Wow. So no issues. Everything's going swimmingly. That's great to hear. And so what was it? Was it cost that kind of brought you to even, come up with this idea?
It was cost. We both wanted, like all of us wanted to live kind of in the same area.
Right.
We had, just similar kind of goals for our future. So it worked out.
That's very cool. And so have you, it took you 2 years. What were the kinds of discussions you were having?
We had to really discuss money openly because we were entering into getting a mortgage
Right.
and huge financial purchase. So that was kind of a big thing, kind of gaining trust and making sure we were all on the same page.
Yeah.
And then really just finding a place that would work for everybody.
What would your advice be for anyone else considering this, Megan?
I would say you really have to go in with an open mind. You have to be very open about, I think money is really hard to talk about. So you have to kind of lay everything on the table. And you have to just know kind of what everybody's strengths and weaknesses are, who's going to take care of, taking out the garbage and all even those little things can make it more tricky if you don't talk about it first.
Yeah, talk about it first. It sounds like you have some free babysitting, or at least convenient babysitting.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a little one, and he's really benefiting from that relationship.
That's great. Megan, thank you so much for your story.
Thank you.
It's Megan in Vancouver. Tim Hill, just a quick reaction to you from you on that story.
I really enjoy it, actually. It's sort of like heartwarming, right? I mean, they took a non-conventional route to home ownership. They've created their own, like their own strata, right? In a way, they've got their own rules. She mentioned, someone who's taking out the garbage, maybe who's mowing the lawn, and just having that collaboration, right? So the ability to live cohesively, and I mean, the in-house babysitter, who could resist that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Right?
Would have been helpful for me. Tim,
Obviously, daycares, right? That's another subject, but
that's right. Tim, thank you so much. Great to speak with you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Tim Hill is a real estate advisor with Remax All Points Realty based in Vancouver. And yes, more on that now. Would you consider splitting the purchase of a home with someone else to try to bring down your costs? We're taking your calls on that. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Do you have any questions about how to make that kind of arrangement work? We have the perfect guest for you right now. Noam Dolgan is a realtor and co-founder of the Collaborative Home Ownership. And hello to you, Noam.
Hello, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. A really interesting story from Megan there. It took them 2 years to, go through all those difficult discussions, right? Talking about money and trying to speak about it openly. Are you seeing more stories like Megan?
Absolutely. This is exactly what we're seeing growing. The popularity of family members, like her case, friends we work a lot with, and even stranger groups coming together.
Wow.
And Megan was 100% accurate in her description. It does take time, and it takes knowing the right questions and having the right conversations early and in advance to make sure you set yourself up for success.
Well, okay, I'll ask you in a moment, what are those conversations? But what are the biggest challenges for people if they're thinking about this, if it's kind of an idea in the back of their mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's, the obvious advantages are right there in front of you, so people get really excited about it. But then they get scared by the two major obstacles or challenges that exist around financing and the fact that you have to be jointly liable and on a mortgage together with your partner, and wanting to feel confident in an exit strategy, knowing that when it's time to go your separate ways, that you have a system by which the person who wants to leave can leave, but also the person who wants to stay has a chance to stay in their home. And these, and then other social considerations and kind of timelines and rules. This is why we do really guide people through those advanced conversations to make sure you have the right social structure, the right financial structure, the right legal structure that'll protect you from delinquencies, that'll create a timeline for exit and a passageway for exit when you need it. And as you said, you have to really discuss your finances and be clear and transparent. And unfortunately, do a lot of worst case scenario planning. But what we find is when you plan for the worst case, then hopefully that never comes. And if something does come up, you don't have to deal with that question at the worst time. You already have a pathway, you already have a plan, and you can just implement it.
And what are in practical terms, do you come up with new kinds of contracts and work it out that way?
Yeah, so there are lawyers who specialize in co-ownership agreements, and the realtors with Coho BC, the Collaborative Home Ownership Initiative, can help you create an overview, an agreement in principle of how you would like to deal with these questions and help you bring that to your lawyer. And you'll have a personalized contract that's really specific to your relationship, your financial structure, your property. And it will become your guideline, or as Tim said earlier, your little strata rules.
Right, right. Have you come across, down the line, because I imagine you work with people at the outset, but have you heard down the line from people who do come into conflict with each other?
Yeah, I mean, you do hear about it occasionally, and we can help people navigate those relationships later. And sometimes it involves the resale of a unit, and we help people resell shares and properties as well. So really showing this model can work for everybody, in every situation. But this is where we really focus on folks setting them up for success from the front. New buyer groups or people selling a share in their property to a new partner, making sure they have the right conversations in advance and the right plan before they commit to each other. And if you do that, you rarely see problems come up. The story you hear about every once in a while in the newspaper about someone going to court over a bad co-ownership agreement. It does happen, but it's always a case where there is no agreement between the parties.
To begin with, it's an interesting, trend, seeming trend, and people are getting creative. It seems though like it's trying to work around the root problem, which is affordability. Is this really the solution, or should we be just trying to tackle housing affordability?
Well, of course, we should be trying to tackle housing affordability, and this is not the solution. It's a hack. It's a solution, given the realities of the situation. But it also solves problems beyond, no matter what the affordability point is. So we like to say that co-ownership is also about getting better housing for less money. So you have that babysitter you were talking about.
Right.
You have your neighbors, your social supports. You can live in neighborhoods that otherwise aren't available to you because they're not zoned for multiplexes. You can stay in your home, age in your home, but access your equity by having somebody build a laneway house on the back of your property, or you build the laneway house and sell off the main thing. So there's a lot of draws, not just financial, that will bring people to co-ownership because you can really get better supportive community out of it. And no matter what the price points have been, people have always been co-owning. People co-own for generations with family. There was a large movement of co-owners in the 70s when prices seemed high at the time, and now looking back, they seem ridiculously cheap. There's always going to be people who can't afford to get into the market no matter what the price point is. So this is going to be a piece of the market no matter what, and it's growing. But if every house was built with affordability in mind and community in mind and sustainability in mind, you might not need this nearly as much.
It sounds like you've got a vision for where this might go, though. Noam, really good to hear from you. Thanks so much for giving us a peek into how this actually works for people who have been interested in it. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely, no problem.
Take care. Noam Dolgan is a realtor and co-founder of the Collaborative Home Ownership. And my thanks to realtor Tim Hill as well. Thanks to our callers. If you want to let us know your thoughts on this after having heard the segment, you can email us bctoday@cbc.ca.